Hey, what's up, guys? Dr. Chad with Energy Physio here again with Dr. Caden. Today, as promised, we're talking a little bit about managing shoulder pain in the gym. Probably one of the most common pains that you're going to experience. That's one of the most common things we experience here in the clinic. Is helping our active adults, athletes, and fitness enthusiasts manage shoulder pain. And, it's super prevalent, and there's some really easy fixes for it. We're coming in a little late today, and we're going to be jumping out a little early. So we're going to pack in as much as we can here in the next 15 or 20 minutes. But essentially, when somebody is experiencing shoulder pain, we can always trace that back to one thing. And that is they're doing a movement that requires more shoulder motion than that person actually has. And, just thinking about like a kipping anything, so toes to bar, kipping pull-ups, whatever, the shoulder actually needs much more than the kind of standard PT 180. The shoulder has to be able to move back behind the head to a pretty large degree. If somebody only has 160 degrees of shoulder flexion and they're trying anything kipping, well, that's going to end up in pain on the shoulder. So screening for this stuff is actually pretty simple. And, if you want to help your members really dial the pain back and have a higher quality experience when they come to the gym, and screening for that, understanding what are your scales and regressions off of that can help your member not only reduce their pain, but also come up with a plan, kind of an attack strategy for how do we get from limited mobility and pain to increased mobility and improved movement without pain. And you can't know that if you're not screening for what's the problem here. So something else that we see is like if you got an athlete that can get on a front rack out of the rig and everything looks good, but then the receiving position in a clean looks really bad, that athlete is probably missing internal rotation. So that hang shape in that pull dumps the shoulders forward and they end up catching rounded spine, which will look much different than if they just get on the bar in the rack, everything looks organized. So these are just some telltale things that you can pick up on. Hey, I think you might be missing some motion here. Let's work on cleaning that up. Some simple mobilizations to improve joint capacity really, really fast. Okay, so we're not trying to eat up all our time in the workouts. We want these doses 2 to 4 minutes if it's both sides versus one side, where we can get people almost this semi-instant pop and range of motion that improves their positioning and decreases their pain. So when we're talking about the shoulder, Caden, you being a CrossFit coach, I mean, CrossFit takes a lot of reps on the shoulder in a lot of different ways. What's been your experience of what types of pain do most CrossFit athletes experience? And we can kind of strip this down into some other like overhead sports. Doesn't have to be CrossFit, but just a lot of reps on the shoulder in CrossFit, so it's pretty common. What types of pain do you see, and what types of limitations do you see in the gym that people are experiencing? And really what we're looking at here is, are there known restrictions and the athletes are pushing through it anyway? So like somebody's missing 30 degrees of overhead and they're still doing kipping pull-ups. Just kind of talk through what you see as a coach.
Yeah, it's a lot of like pinching pain. So, athletes getting like that pinching feeling in their shoulder, probably mostly coming from lacking overhead. Flexion is the biggest one that I see a lot of people missing. Probably second to that would be the hang shape, not having any sort of internal rotation. I mean, you get a handful of people that maybe are a little stiff externally, but can sort of get into that with just a little bit of a warm-up progression. But internal rotation and flexion are really messed up. But one that gets kind of missed, sort of flies under the radar, is extension of the shoulder. That pops up a lot in like dips or bench press, any sort of pressing shape. Typically, the most that you'll see in this sort of horizontal press out of a general CrossFit program is going to be push-ups. Any form of a push-up is about all the pressing we get there. There's not as much of an emphasis on a lot of like benching weights. So we're missing a lot in the extension. Couple that with some internal rotation issues, and all of a sudden you get a lot of that like pinching feeling in the shoulder. And then we still want to push through because we're trying to get a score. So kipping getting as many fast reps as we can on a shoulder that doesn't actually let us move all the way through. Just a recipe for nastiness down the road.
Yeah, and you bring up something there. That's kind of one of my peeves with CrossFit is, bench press is rarely programmed in. And certainly this doesn't apply to every box, but, for coaches, I think it would be really important to understand like the importance of the chest. Okay. I mean, look at, take your top 5 male CrossFit athletes in the games and look at their chest. Okay. They didn't get that doing burpees. You know what I mean? They supplement their CrossFit with other styles of training, which also doesn't happen in this kind of gym pop training mentality for CrossFitters, right? But I mean, your chest is essentially the butt of your arm. It's the biggest, strongest muscle, and it provides such a protective mechanism across the front of the shoulder that being overhead all the time without that giant front of the shoulder support structure or anterior support structure, I think is one of the biggest missing links in really all shoulder pain. Most people don't have enough strength through their upper body anyway. Start getting into like some active females and they really struggle with some upper body strength and power. But, almost totally neglecting the heavier workouts on the chest and CrossFit, I think opens people up to some of these shoulder pain problems. And you touched on like that missing extension piece, right? And so if we're never challenging that position with a bench press, you're never going to have a position that you don't frequently find yourself in. And, when we're looking at the shoulder mechanics, there's 2 things we're always looking at. We see these here in the clinic, me and Caden, when we screen athletes, what we're looking for is, do they have enough external rotation combined with their flexion? So a lot of times when we see people missing overhead, they get that overhead motion back by internally rotating the shoulder. That opens them up to that pinching pain. It destabilizes the whole joint, and it creates a lot of slack and variability in the joint when doing motions. The other thing that's pretty common is like the opposite of that flexion external rotation. The most stable position in the shoulder in extension is extension and internal rotation. Just winds things up really nice, tight, and stable. And so when people are missing extension or missing internal rotation, they flare out into these less desirable positions that are unstable. And that's where we start to get like, forward shifting of the ball in the socket. We'll see people's, biceps tendons start to get real lit up. We'll see people's low traps start to blow up the trigger points and create anterior, or not anterior, but like pain right on the top of the shoulder. There's just a lot of things that can happen when we're not screening athletes for available motion, not scaling them based on their motion. And that's maybe a topic that is a little off the wall, but in CrossFit, what do you typically scale for? How do you typically scale somebody?
In what context?
I mean, when I go,
what's the process?
I just mean like if you're gonna scale somebody, I'm not gonna give away the answer here unless you make me, but typically when coaches scale, they scale in 2 ways. What do you think those 2 ways are?
Either decreasing load or decreasing reps.
Yep. And I would even say sometimes just changing the movement altogether. Like pull up down to the ring.
Doing something completely
terrible.
Different.
Yeah, terrible scale. But that's what you see a lot. And really, so like in our space, how we think of scaling is we want to scale for position, right? You don't even have to change the movement. Like if somebody physically can't complete the movement, we got to find some type of assist or regression so that they can complete the movement. We always prefer to stay in the same plane of movement if we can. So dropping from a pull-up to a ring rows is why we think a lot of CrossFitters who've been in the game for a long time still can't do a pull-up. They started 5 years ago and they still can't get pull-ups. And they're wondering, why can't I get them? Because they're doing ring rows. But scaling for position is a better way to scale because you stay in the same movement pattern. But we're trying to find the best positions that that person can hit to stay there. And that not only helps with mobility, but also helps with pain and keeping the mechanics, keeping the body in a position that's not going to stress it out and increase like tendonitis, bursitis, any of these weird things that happen when the body is not moving like it's supposed to be moving.
And sometimes I think it's important if you're dealing with pain because of a limitation in your movement. So let's say it's, let's say your extension is lacking and or maybe it's the overhead, or you're doing something that's like with weight, sticking with the same movement, but just decreasing load, especially if it's not painful when you do it with a lighter weight, do it with a lighter weight, but just add tempo to it. That's another way for us to really get some stimulus out of the workout without needing to change the movement altogether. And that's something that I think gets a little bit missed. Like, hey, someone can't do pull-ups, but maybe they can do assisted pull-ups with a band, a really thick band. But instead of doing it really quickly, which is what we're used to doing in CrossFit workouts because we want to try to get a score, have the athlete actually practice the assist with the pull and then lower on a slower tempo. Do it for less reps. That'll take the same amount of time as if you did more reps fast. And now you're sticking with the time domain of the workout, but you're getting a lot more out of it.
Yeah. Tempo is a great thing that I think gets missed a lot, especially when you're on the clock. Like tempo is the last thing you're thinking about. But when the goal is to complete a movement with quality, adding tempo is the same as adding weight. Adding time is the same as adding weight or even adding reps, because your time under tension is the same. You might not have as many contractions, as many concentrics and eccentrics, but you've done the same amount of work or more in the same amount of time without adding reps or weight, which, in the clinic is a kind of a strategy we use for people quite frequently to help them kind of grease the wheels of strict movement. CrossFit is almost divided into like thirds. You've got strict, and then you've got a little more speed and a little more speed after that. An easy example is like strict press, push jerk, right? Every time you level up, it requires more speed, and your programming is almost divided between three. And really, strict should be the bulk of most programming, especially for the general population, because if you're not frequenting the strict movements, your strict strength is decreasing and your resilience is decreasing. And if you're weak and soft in the strict, adding speed on top of that becomes more dangerous and opens you up to this big like injury potential, because speed is like the three loads we talk about. We might have mentioned this last time, like the L3 model of true load, metabolic load, speed load, which is a neurological load that actually incorporates all three. The faster you go, the heavier it is on your body, the more your metabolic system has to churn it out, and your nervous system has to work faster to try and control those positions. And so it's going to open you up to any flaws you have by working fast. And if you don't have the buffer of just brute raw strength as a foundation there, that's where we start to see these shoulder pain problems really creeping in. We're taking a lot of high volume, high repetitions at extreme ranges of motion. And we see a lot of people doing this stuff without really the basics of like foundational strength present. And, we see people coming in and they can do, 10 or 12 butterfly or kipping pull-ups. But they can't do 5 strict. Well, we think you should be able to do 10 strict push-ups before you even start kipping at all. And that's just a protective mechanism for the shoulder. There's just so many like interesting things. As human beings, we're so completion based, and we want to jump into this community of CrossFitters and we want to participate on the same level. But I think as coaches, we have to really educate people on, hey, what's safe, what's effective, what are your goals, and how can we help you get there? And just know that like what we're dialing you back to today is not where we want you to stay. We want to use this as kind of a jumping off point, as a launch pad to help you get safely to where you want to go or where you think you should be, but do it in a way that's kind of intelligently designed around your body's own, boundaries, right? Everybody's got their own internal boundaries. And if we can work within those and develop strength inside of those, improve range of motion and movement mechanics as we go, improve technique as we go. We can see CrossFit athletes' longevity be a lot longer. We can knock down a lot of those pain problems that we see popping up in the gym, especially in the shoulder. It just takes a little more consistent effort, I think, on the coach's part to be able to assess, identify what's the missing link here, what's a better scale, really, how can we interject some mobility work in the moment to pop that back and see, maybe somebody has the strength for a kipping pull-up, they don't have the motion. What do? I'm sure you've seen many of those athletes. It's like, hey, look, you're really good at kipping pull-ups, but you really don't have the prerequisite joint mobility to do that safely. And you see those athletes with a lot of breakdown in other places. They're completing the task, but it looks terrible. But in their minds, they're thinking, I'm good at this, and it doesn't hurt right now, so I must be doing it good. As a coach, where does your mind go when you see that happen?
People pushing through with things not looking that great, like the wheels are about to fall off.
Yeah, but in their mind, they're thinking, I can do this and it doesn't hurt, so there's no reason why I shouldn't do it.
Those are the hardest kind of people to coach, because you could let them know, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and this is the path you're on. This is what's probably going to happen if we don't clean this up. But they're like, I feel fine doing it. It's felt fine for the past 5 years. I don't know why I should change it now. It's tough. And it's tough, especially going back to what you said about getting people to stop in the middle of a workout to do something to hopefully make it not hurt or make it move better and then continue. That's a tough mindset to break through for a lot of CrossFitters. So no, I started the workout, I'm going to keep going hard until it's over. But I think what some level 1 trainers forget is in the level 1, they teach you how to stop somebody when things are falling apart. So they teach you mechanics, consistency, then intensity. Solid mechanics consistently well, then you add intensity, which looks like load, speed, and volume. If somebody starts to go faster and it starts to fall apart and the consistency of the mechanics starts to fall apart, they actually teach you to say, stop. Quit doing the movement. We need to slow down. We need to change. And I don't think there are a lot of coaches out there that are comfortable telling people to stop their workout or change something in the middle of the workout because they feel like they're being mean. And I don't know. I feel like I'm being paid to give somebody a really good result and a good experience. And what good is the experience if you're hurt and you can't come back to the gym?
Sure. I almost think a kind of a foundational question to ask would be are you okay being coached? Because I might say some things that kind of counter to what you think, or you might feel good and I might ask you to scale, is that okay? And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking somebody, because certainly if the person's gonna say, no, I don't want you to tell me anything, great, don't waste your time and don't waste your breath, and save your I told you so for later. But you were saying that and I thought, stop, collaborate and listen. And but that's really what you have to do as a coach. You have to stop the athlete, and we're not preaching this to CrossFit coaches. In here, we're coaches, so same thing. Somebody's doing their squats and they're inside the middle of a workout, we still have to say stop, because we're pursuing a certain position. And if they're not hitting it, it's not okay for us to say, okay, finish your set out, we'll work on this after. It's oh, look, here's the goal. We're trying to get you to move really well. If you want to move often, that's great, but mechanics first, then consistency, then intensity. And it's the same thing in the clinic when we're bringing somebody out of an injury. We're getting them squatting, and we want flawless as possible squat first. And if they're in the middle of their set, let's say we're doing 8 reps and they're on 3 or 4, it's hey, let's pause right there. Let's troubleshoot around this thing. If we can't get to the result we want, let's scale. Maybe bring our deadlift up on 6-inch blocks, or let's do a box squat instead of a full depth squat, whatever the case may be. But it literally is a collaboration between coaches and athletes of understanding hey, what we're pursuing here is movement quality, movement consistency, and then increasing movement intensity. And and I think both have to listen back and forth, right? The coach can't just totally negate what the athlete is telling you. And the athlete can't totally negate what the coach is telling them. There's got to be that collaboration built in there if we're going to create good experiences for athletes in a way that moves everybody forwards in the right direction. Kind of going back to that liked versus respected. I think you can't have both, but to be respected first and they like you because you're helping them move in a certain direction, that's that collaboration and listening between the coach and the athlete. And you're right, it's super hard to do when the clock's running. It's super hard to do when you got a class of 15 people. But doing the difficult things almost always has the most positive benefit for everybody when you stick to it.
And even the small things are better than nothing. It's very easy when you see a class of 15 people to maybe only want to pick out a few to like go give some like real in-depth feedback on and then just let the rest do their thing. But it takes an especially dedicated level of detail to be like, okay, I'm going to hit every single person and at least find something that I know I can help them with and make that point of contact. Because the last thing you want as a coach is to go through an entire class and have even one person feel like you didn't give them any specific attention. And I feel like the more experienced athletes are the ones who get treated that way the most. Especially newer coaches will think, oh, they've been doing this a while. They're probably fine. I'll go focus on these other people. It's like, hey, sometimes they want to hear some feedback too. And there's always something that you can tweak or make a comment on or chat with if you feel like it's actually a worthy thing to improve on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. So we kind of ran this one short. I think maybe a good play here is maybe we got sparked some interest in like, hey, we probably should monitor the shoulder a little bit. There are some easy things, and we want to share those with you. Just 2 simple tests for overhead position and for internal rotation. So those are the most common like missing elements we see in the shoulder positions. And you can test them both from the same position. So next Wednesday when we jump in, we'll have a little more time available to us. We're going to teach you how do you check for overhead motion inefficiencies, how do you check for internal rotation limitations, and then we're going to walk through, okay, if you identify these in people, what are some quick mobilizations you can do to improve those positions? If the positions don't improve, what are our preferred scales and regressions off of the target movement to get people moving in the same plane but with less risk of injury? And this is especially if your people are painful. And then we'll kind of jump back in and wrap up with a couple other concepts around the shoulder after you test, retest, put somebody through a workout, and then how do you help them kind of long-term develop a strategy to consistently improve their motion. So stay tuned. We'll be back next week. Sorry for the short one this week. We're going to get into the pot of gold next Wednesday at 2 p.m. So we'll see you guys there.